The winter of 1877 had been merciless to Amelia Zimmerman, stealing first her husband to typhoid, then her crops to frost, and now threatening her very survival as the last ember in her cabin's hearth surrendered to the darkness. Outside, snow piled against the walls of her small homestead near Sweetwater Creek, Wyoming Territory, the wind's mournful howl matching the emptiness in her heart. At 23, Amelia had not imagined herself a widow, alone on the frontier with nothing but a dying farm and fading hopes. Her slender fingers trembled as she struck her last match, watching helplessly as the tiny flame flickered and died before catching the kindling. The single candle on her table cast weak shadows across the room, its light diminishing with each passing minute. "Please," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was addressing God or the stubborn kindling. "Just a little warmth." Her prayers went unanswered as the temperature continued to drop. Wrapping herself in every blanket she owned, Amelia huddled in the corner, watching her breath form clouds in the frigid air. Sleep would be dangerous tonight. She had heard stories of settlers who closed their eyes during cold snaps, never to open them again. The sound of hoofbeats broke through the howling wind, so faint at first that Amelia thought she had imagined it. Then came a solid knock at her door. "Hello? Anybody alive in there?" A deep voice called out. Clutching her blankets around her shoulders, Amelia approached the door cautiously. Visitors after dark were rare in good weather, let alone during a blizzard. "Who's there?" she called, her voice cracking from disuse. "Name's Vaughn Irwin, madam. I've lost my way in this storm and spotted your candlelight. I don't mean to intrude, but my horse and I won't last the night out here." Amelia hesitated only briefly before sliding back the bolt. Standing before her was a tall man with broad shoulders, his hat and coat crusted with snow, a scarf pulled up to his nose. Behind him, she could just make out the shape of a horse, head lowered against the wind. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. "But I can't offer much warmth. My fire's gone out and I've used my last match." Vaughn stomped the snow from his boots and led his horse to the side of the cabin, where a small lean-to offered minimal shelter. After securing the animal and grabbing his saddlebags, he returned to the doorway. "Thank you kindly," he said, removing his hat to reveal dark hair flecked with silver at the temples. Despite the cold, his eyes were warm, the deep blue of summer skies. Amelia guessed him to be in his early 30s, with lines at the corners of his eyes suggesting he smiled often. "I've got supplies that might help us both." From his saddlebag, Vaughn produced a tinderbox, several candles, jerky, and a flask. "First things first," he said, kneeling before the hearth. "Let's get some warmth in here before that last candle gives up." His hands moved with practiced efficiency, arranging the kindling and striking his flint. Within minutes, a small flame caught, growing steadily as he fed it carefully selected pieces of wood from the pile beside the fireplace. Amelia watched in silence, mesmerized by both the growing fire and the stranger's quiet competence. As warmth began to seep back into the room, she felt something else stirring, a flicker of hope she thought had died with her husband. "I'm Amelia Zimmerman," she finally said, setting her blankets aside as the cabin gradually warmed. "This was my husband's homestead. He passed last spring." Vaughn nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Zimmerman. No one should be facing a Wyoming winter alone." He offered her his flask. "It's just coffee with a touch of whiskey. It'll warm you from the inside." Their fingers brushed as she accepted the flask, sending an unexpected shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. Amelia took a small sip, the warm liquid tracing a path down to her stomach. "What brings you out in weather like this, Mr. Irwin?" she asked, returning the flask. "Just Vaughn, please," he replied, settling back on his heels to admire his handiwork as the fire crackled cheerfully. I was heading to Laramie with some horses for the army. Thought I could beat the storm, but it came in faster than expected. I sent the horses ahead with my partners and doubled back to find shelter. He paused, looking around the sparse cabin. Seems like fate led me to your door. As the night wore on, they shared what food they had: Amelia's last potatoes and carrots, Vaughn's jerky and hardtack. The conversation flowed easily between them, as if they were old friends catching up rather than strangers thrown together by circumstance. Vaughn told stories of his years as a horse trader, traveling between Texas and Wyoming, of the characters he'd met and the landscapes he'd traversed. Amelia found herself laughing for the first time in months at his tale of outsmarting a swindler in Cheyenne. In turn, she shared how she and her husband Thomas had journeyed west from Pennsylvania 3 years earlier, full of dreams about their homestead. How they'd struggled that first year, nearly giving up before their first modest harvest. How the typhoid had taken Thomas so quickly she barely had time to say goodbye. "And now," Vaughn asked gently, "what are your plans?" Amelia stared into the fire. "I don't know any more. The bank in town has been patient, but I'm behind on the loan payments, without help for spring planting." She trailed off, the reality of her situation settling heavily on her shoulders once more. "Well," Vaughn said, standing to add another log to the fire, "we've got tonight sorted. Tomorrow, we'll see what can be done about tomorrow." When it came time to sleep, Amelia insisted Vaughn take the bed while she made a pallet near the fire. He refused outright. "My mother would roll over in her grave if she knew I took a lady's bed," he said firmly. "The floor suits me fine. I've slept on worse." Amelia eventually relented, too exhausted to argue further. As she drifted toward sleep, warmed by the fire Vaughn had built, she realized the crushing loneliness that had been her constant companion for months had, at least for tonight, retreated to the corners of the room, held at bay by the presence of a kind stranger. Morning arrived with clear skies and brilliant sunshine that transformed the landscape into a glittering wonderland. Amelia woke to the smell of coffee and found Vaughn already up, tending the fire and preparing a simple breakfast from his supplies. "Good morning," he said, his smile crinkling those lines around his eyes. "Storm's past. Thought you might like some coffee before I head out." Disappointment settled in her chest at the thought of his departure, though she knew it was foolish. Of course he would leave. Everyone did eventually. "Thank you," she said, accepting the tin cup he offered, "for everything. I'm not sure I would have made it through the night without your help." "Happy to be of service," he replied, then hesitated. "Mrs. Zimmerman, Amelia, before I go, would you allow me to check your woodpile? Maybe help secure things around the property, just to ensure you're set until the snow melts." Relief flooded through her. "I would appreciate that very much." What was meant to be a few hours of assistance stretched into the day, as Vaughn discovered just how precarious Amelia's situation truly was. The woodpile was dangerously low. The roof had several spots where snow had leaked through, and the chicken coop needed reinforcing against predators. Working together, they made what repairs they could. Vaughn chopped wood until the pile was respectable again, while Amelia patched the roof from inside the attic. When dusk approached, they were both exhausted but satisfied with their progress. "I should go," Vaughn said, though he made no move toward his horse. "My partners will be wondering what happened to me." Amelia nodded, fighting the urge to ask him to stay. "Of course. You've done more than enough already." He lifted his hat, ran a hand through his hair and replaced it, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign he was thinking deeply about something. "The thing is," he said slowly, "there's another storm coming. I can feel it in my bones, Probably hit by tomorrow night. He gestured toward the western horizon where dark clouds were already gathering. I don't feel right leaving you here alone to face it. What are you suggesting? Amelia asked, her heart quickening. I need to get word to my partners in Laramie, but I could return after, bring more supplies. Help you get through winter, maybe even prepare for spring planting. He met her eyes directly. If you'd allow it. Amelia knew the proper response would be to decline, to insist she could manage on her own. But the prospect of facing the rest of winter alone was more terrifying than admitting she needed help. I would be grateful, she said finally, but I can't pay you. Vaughn shook his head. Not looking for payment, just seems the right thing to do. He paused. And truth be told, I've been considering settling down somewhere. Might be nice to see if I've got any talent for farming. That night, as Vaughn prepared to leave for Laramie, promising to return in 3 days, Amelia gave him her last candle. To light your way back, she said. Vaughn's fingers closed around the candle, and for a moment they both held it, a tangible connection between them. I'll come back, he said softly. That's a promise. 3 days stretched to 5 as another storm swept across the territory. Amelia tried not to worry, telling herself Vaughn had simply decided to wait out the weather in Laramie. Or perhaps he'd reconsidered his offer. She wouldn't blame him. What man would willingly tie himself to a struggling widow and her failing farm? On the 6th day, as Amelia was feeding her chickens, the sound of multiple horses approaching drew her attention to the road. There was Vaughn leading a wagon loaded with supplies, 2 additional horses tied behind. Sorry for the delay, he called out as he approached. Storm was worse than expected. The relief that flooded through her was so intense she had to grip the fence post to steady herself. I thought you might not come back. He jumped down from the wagon, landing with a soft crunch in the snow. I gave my word, didn't I? His eyes searched her face. Though I'd understand if you've changed your mind about my staying. No, she said quickly. No, I haven't changed my mind. The wagon contained more than just supplies. Vaughn had brought tools, seeds for spring planting, a milk cow, and most precious of all, books. Thought the evenings might get long, he explained when he saw her delight at the small collection. They established a routine in the days that followed. Vaughn slept in the lean-to, which he expanded and reinforced into a proper shelter. During the day, they worked side by side, repairing what had fallen into disrepair after Thomas's death, preparing for spring as best they could during winter's grip. In the evenings, they sat before the fire, sometimes reading aloud from Vaughn's books, sometimes sharing stories of their lives. Amelia learned that Vaughn had been born in Missouri, had fought briefly for the Union during the final year of the Civil War, and had spent the past 12 years moving between jobs: cowhand, horse trader, occasionally a scout for the Army. Never stayed in one place long enough to put down roots, he admitted one night. Always thought there might be something better over the next horizon. And now, Amelia asked, wondering if he was already feeling the itch to move on. Vaughn stared into the fire for a long moment. Now I'm thinking maybe what I've been looking for wasn't a place at all. February gave way to March, bringing with it the first tentative signs of spring. The snow began to retreat, revealing the dormant earth beneath. Amelia found herself watching Vaughn as he worked, admiring the way his muscles moved beneath his shirt, the gentleness with which he handled the animals, the careful attention he paid to every task. She also noticed how he sometimes watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, a softness in his expression that made her heart flutter in a way it hadn't since she was a young girl. One evening, as they sat side by side darning socks, a skill Vaughn had surprisingly mastered during his years on the trail, their hands brushed. Instead of pulling away, Vaughn's fingers curled around hers. "Amelia," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I need to say something, and I hope you won't think less of me for it." She set aside her sewing, her pulse quickening. "What is it? I came here intending only to help a neighbor in need. I didn't expect." He faltered, then tried again. "These past weeks have been the happiest I can remember, being here with you, working together." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I find myself thinking of this place as home, and you." He met her eyes. "I find myself thinking of you as someone I could love if you'd allow it." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. A part of her felt like she was betraying Thomas, but a stronger part recognized that life was continuing, pulling her forward. "I've been alone a long time," she said carefully. "Even before Thomas died in some ways. The homestead was his dream more than mine." She turned her hand to lace her fingers with his. "But being here with you, I've started to imagine a future again. A good one." Vaughn's smile was like the spring sun breaking through winter clouds. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and filled with promise. When they separated, Amelia felt as if something long dormant inside her had finally awakened. "Stay," she whispered. "Not just for spring planting. Stay for good." "Nothing would make me happier," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But I want to do right by you. People will talk if I stay here unmarried." "Let them talk," Amelia said, surprising herself with her boldness. Vaughn chuckled, but his expression remained serious. "All the same, I'd like to court you properly, if that's agreeable to you." "It is," she said, smiling. "Though I think we've already moved beyond the usual getting acquainted stage of courtship." The arrival of spring brought new life to the homestead. With Vaughn's help and knowledge, combined with Amelia's determination, they planted an ambitious crop. They also acquired more chickens, 2 pigs, and began repairs on the barn that had started to lean dangerously to one side. Word of their arrangement had indeed spread through the nearest town, bringing the curious and the judgmental to their door. Vaughn handled them all with the same even-tempered politeness, neither confirming nor denying the nature of their relationship, beyond saying he was helping a neighbor prepare for planting season. The local preacher, Reverend Lawson, paid them a visit one Sunday afternoon, his expression grave as he accepted the coffee Amelia offered. "Mrs. Zimmerman," he began, "there has been talk concerning you and Mr. Irwin." "Has there?" Amelia replied calmly, though her hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee for Vaughn, who had just entered from outside. "Good afternoon, Reverend," Vaughn said, nodding respectfully as he took a seat. "Beautiful day for a ride out to the country." "Indeed," the Reverend agreed stiffly. "Mr. Irwin, I'll be direct. Your presence here, unchaperoned with a widow, is causing considerable gossip." "Mrs. Zimmerman's reputation is of great concern to me," Vaughn interrupted firmly. "Which is why I've been sleeping in the lean-to these past months, and why I've been asking Mrs. Zimmerman for permission to court her properly." The Reverend's eyebrows rose. "Court her? With what intentions, sir?" "The most honorable ones," Vaughn replied, meeting the older man's gaze steadily. "I intend to ask for her hand in marriage once I've proven to her that I'm a man she can rely on." Amelia nearly dropped her cup. Though they had discussed staying together, Vaughn had never explicitly mentioned marriage. The Reverend's demeanor softened somewhat. "I see. Well, that would certainly be more appropriate, though I must say this is still highly irregular." "Life often is, Reverend," Amelia found her voice. "Especially out here. Vaughn saved my life this winter. Without him, I would have frozen to death or starved. I trust him completely." After the Reverend departed, seemingly satisfied if not entirely approving, Amelia turned to Vaughn. Did you mean what you said about marriage? Vaughn took her hands in his. Every word. I was waiting for the right moment, but it seems the Reverend forced my hand. He smiled ruefully. I had hoped to be more romantic about it. I don't need romance, Amelia said. I just need honesty. And partnership. You deserve both, Vaughn said softly. And love. I do love you, Amelia. I think I started falling the moment I saw you in the doorway that night, brave and determined despite everything. I love you too, she admitted, the words both frightening and freeing. I wasn't looking for it. Didn't think I would ever feel this way again. But here we are. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the town church, with only a few neighbors and Vaughn's former business partners as witnesses. Reverend Lawson, won over by their obvious affection for each other, delivered a sermon about new beginnings and second chances that left few dry eyes in the congregation. That night, as they stood together in the cabin that was now truly their home, Vaughn lifted Amelia's hand to his lips. Mrs. Irwin, he said, testing the name, has a nice ring to it. It does, she agreed, stepping into his embrace. Though I'm still getting used to it. We have time, he murmured against her hair. All the time in the world. The first year of their marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Their crops flourished under their combined care, but a hailstorm damaged part of the harvest. The new barn was completed just before the first snow, but one of their horses broke a leg and had to be put down. Through it all, they faced each day together, their bond strengthening with every shared struggle and triumph. Vaughn's experience with horses proved valuable when they began breeding and training them as a secondary income, while Amelia's skill with preserving food saw them through the second winter with plenty to spare. By their first anniversary, they had transformed the struggling homestead into a promising farm. The loan at the bank was paid off, thanks to the sale of several well-trained horses. They had also added a proper porch to the cabin and started work on an addition that would serve as a nursery, a project that took on new urgency when Amelia discovered she was expecting. A baby, Vaughn said in wonder, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. Our baby. Are you happy? Amelia asked, a trace of anxiety in her voice. They hadn't explicitly discussed children, though the assumption had always been there. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, he replied, his eyes suspiciously bright. I never thought I'd have this: a home, a wife I adore, a child on the way. Sometimes I worry it's all a dream and I'll wake up alone on the trail again. Not a dream, Amelia assured him, placing her hand over his. Though I understand the feeling. When my candle was flickering that night, I thought it was the end. Instead, it was just the beginning. Their daughter, Elizabeth, was born the following spring. A robust baby with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. Vaughn proved to be a natural with the infant, pacing the floor with her during colicky nights, singing old trail songs that somehow soothed her more effectively than any lullaby. You're a miracle worker, Amelia commented one evening, watching as Elizabeth drifted to sleep in her father's arms. Just got a knack for soothing fillies, he joked, carefully transferring the sleeping baby to her cradle. Works on both the four-legged and two-legged varieties. As Elizabeth grew, so did their farm. By the time she was toddling around the cabin, they had established a reputation for quality horses and abundant crops. Neighbors who had once gossiped about them now came seeking advice or assistance, which they freely gave. 5 years after that fateful winter night, Amelia stood on their porch, watching Vaughn teach 7-year-old Elizabeth how to gentle a new foal. Their son, Daniel, not quite 3, sat on the fence rail, securely held by his father's free arm as he watched the proceedings with wide-eyed fascination. The homestead had expanded to include a larger barn, a proper corral, and fields that stretched to the horizon. The cabin, too, had grown, with additional rooms for the children, and a larger kitchen where Amelia experimented with recipes she planned to include in a cookbook she was writing. Life wasn't perfect. The Wyoming Territory still presented challenges in the form of harsh weather, occasional disputes with neighbors over water rights, and the constant work required to maintain their growing farm. But it was a good life, rich with purpose and love. That evening, after the children were asleep, Amelia and Vaughn sat together on the porch swing he had built for her last birthday. The spring air was cool but pleasant, filled with the promise of summer. "You ever regret it?" Amelia asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "Stopping here that night, staying," Vaughn's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Not for a single moment," he replied. "Best decision I ever made was knocking on your door." "And the second best," she teased. "Coming back," he said seriously. "Though that wasn't really a decision. More like a necessity." He turned to face her. "I think a part of me knew even then that you were my home, that everything I'd been searching for was right here." Amelia leaned her head against his shoulder, content in a way she once thought impossible. "Do you remember what you said that first night, when I asked what your plans were?" Vaughn chuckled. "Something about dealing with tomorrow when it came, I think." "And here we are," Amelia said softly, "all these tomorrows later." Inside the cabin, a candle burned steadily in the window, not out of necessity anymore, but as a tradition they had established. A reminder of how their story began, with her last candle flickering low and a cowboy who had lit not just her hearth, but her heart with warmth. "Here's to many more tomorrows," Vaughn said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Each one better than the last." As the stars emerged above their home, Amelia closed her eyes and gave thanks for second chances, for desperate prayers answered in unexpected ways, and for the love that had transformed a dying homestead into a place of hope and new beginnings.